Okay. Well, we asked for the setup for these guys to be closer, and we really did it. You're right here. Okay, so thank you guys so much for being here. Without everything that you do, none of us would be employed, so thank you for that. All right, so last night, some insider information is last night we all had dinner and wine down here, and we got together and we hung out for about 2 hours, I would say, and got to know one another, and I got to understand, I use it as a little bit of research and development. I got to understand what it is that you guys are up to in the world and why it matters. And one of the things that I uncovered, which I was kind of hoping for, was that there's like a red thread that runs both through your meetups and through who you guys are as organizers. And I feel really strongly that red thread is reflected in some of the qualities that we as a team talked about last week. And I shared with them, you guys, that we had done that work, and it was something that we shared at Meetup Date, and I talked about the qualities being welcoming and impactful and real and spirited and thoughtful. And so we had a lot of conversation last night around how both their meetups are representations of those qualities, but that you guys are organizers that represent those qualities as well, which is why you were chosen. So thank you for being so great at what you do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the qualities and how they show up. And I actually organized it in a way where I'm asking you each specific questions. Okay? But then feel free to just jump in and interrupt one another like we did last night too. And then we're going to leave about 15 minutes for questions afterward. Okay? So be thinking about what questions you might have, and then jump up and ask these guys. Okay, so Matt, we're going to start with you. Hot seat. How do you make dads who are new to your group feel welcome?
It's a good question, because it's one we talk about, obviously, but we also don't want to make it feel like we're trying to make somebody feel welcome. So one of our kind of founding principles is that we want to make sure dads of all stripes really do feel welcome to our meetups, which is actually something you have to think through, because the world isn't very accepting right now. And we outwardly say that we want gay dads to be part of our group. We want African American dads to be part of our group. We want single dads to be part of our group. And we want them to show up to our meetups. So creating meetups that allow working dads to come to a meetup, at-home dads that are at a place that is generally welcoming is important to us. And that's been interesting. We're on Meetup Pro. We have 29 groups across the country. So we started in New York City. We started in New York City, so saying that you want gay dads to be part of your group doesn't shake the earth, but in some of these cities, that's new, and people are still opening their minds to where the world is going. So it's been a real conversation also with the people we have chosen to run our groups. They need to share our values and really understand those values, and we've had some bumps along the way, but for the most part, I think our values have lasted through the groups that we have out there.
We talked a little bit about this last night. I mean, it's crazy that we're living in a world where being a dad is a niche group, or to celebrate being a dad as a niche group, but it actually is. And what you guys are doing is really niche as well. And Jeff, what you're doing is really niche. And you guys don't know this, but last week the lead team went out to dinner. And I thought that it was going to be like margaritas in Brendan's backyard. And Fiona suggested that we go to Korean barbecue and karaoke. So because my children hold their ears when I sing to them at night, I had this fear of like, oh my God, this is going to be a horror show. And Fiona does this really wonderful, you weren't doing it intentionally, I don't think, but because she has this quality of being welcoming and inclusive, she just like jumps up, chooses songs, gets us all singing, and then finally it doesn't feel that scary. And you have this, and so I felt like, okay, I can sing karaoke with people that I'm just starting to get to know, no big deal. And you have this group where it's, okay, explain what it is, because not everybody will know.
Okay, so Dungeon Crawl Classics is a very niche game. It's similar to Dungeons and Dragons, which already is a very kind of a niche game to begin with, that not a lot of people really even kind of understand what it is or how it works. It's not a video game. Dungeons and Dragons are a bunch of people kind of sitting around a table. doing kind of collaborative storytelling with dice and paper and pencil. You've got people who have characters and one person who's kind of running the story, who's called the Dungeon Master. And there aren't a lot of people who you find who are really into this game necessarily, and those who you do find are kind of, I don't know, but anyways, Dungeon Crawl Classics is...
Say more,
Nice.
say more.
It attracts many kinds. So Dungeon Crawl Classics is specifically a group, it's a game that's designed for people who really like the old school style of Dungeons and Dragons. So it's even a smaller niche community within an already niche community. And when I was looking to start playing this game, because I had played it once, had a great time playing it, and the Dungeons and Dragons team that I'd been playing with for about 10 years had kind of fallen apart. Somebody had a kid, somebody moved to Iowa, somebody else moved to California. And I really wanted to play this game that I had played once before and had so much fun playing, and I couldn't find anybody. Like, I'm going on to the role-playing games, like Dungeons and Dragons. They have a big presence on Google+. So I was going to the Google+ Dungeon Crawl Classics group, trying to find people in New York who wanted to play. Couldn't find anybody. Was looking on Facebook, kind of Googling, nothing. So I'm like, I live in a city of 8 million people. There have got to be people in this city who want to play this game. So I decided to start the Meetup group to find those people and kind of create a community in New York around that game.
And it's a very special interest. And so if I'm scrolling through and I see this group and I show up and I'm new, and it's 7 or 8 people that are playing, and they kind of maybe already all know each other, have played together before, I may be new to the game and new to the group. How do you make sure that people feel included?
Well, that happens all the time because Dungeon Crawl Classics, for one thing, is only a game that's been around since 2012, 2013, so it's a pretty new game to begin with. And we do get a lot of people who are repeat attendees who have been playing the game. The group's only been around for 13 months now. So a lot of the people who are coming have played with us a bunch, but I've had plenty of people come, and I'd say at almost every session, there's usually at least one person who's new to the group who may have only played Dungeons and Dragons, or maybe hasn't played any kind of a role-playing game at all, and they watched Stranger Things and thought it looked fun or funny, or like they just wanted to try this thing. And so oftentimes what will happen is people will join the group, and then I'll get a message from somebody saying like, I've never really played a game like this before. Like, what do I need to read before I come? What do I need to bring? Is it okay that I don't really know how to play? And I always just reply saying, like, you don't need to bring anything, and it's fine that you don't know how to play. We'll walk you through this. We're happy to hold your hand through the whole process. I'm like, you don't even need to bring dice. All you need to do is just show up, and we'll show you how it works. And because of that, we have managed to get a lot of people who have come, who've never played a game like this before, who come again for more and more games. Like right now, we've got this woman named Kate who's in her 50s, and her kids have just moved away, and she's always wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons and found this group, and she's now come to like 3 or 4 of our meetups. And
She's like finally role playing. Been waiting for this my whole life. Okay, but last night we were talking about how not every organizer is great at that. It is actually a really unique skill to be able to put people at ease, especially strangers. And you do that as soon as you walk into a room. And so I wanted to know if you could talk about, or could you talk about, please, since you're on the panel and you're required to talk about the things I asked you to talk about. When have you seen that not work? Like, you shared some experiences last night where you have been to meetups and not felt included. Question 1. And question 2 is, how do you, what is it about you that puts people at ease?
I mean, let's answer the first question. So I think the limited amount of meetups that I've been to that have been non-inclusive, the organizer essentially wasn't involved. You kind of see the organizer sitting off to the side or kind of talking to an exclusive group of people and not interacting with anyone that walks in the door even. And that, of course, can be a little jarring for someone who's coming to any group, no matter what type of group it is or how what the orientation of the group is. To see that people are kind of exclusively in little pockets and cliques, it's very off-putting. It turns you off, and I never returned. So it's one of those things that, without even thinking about it, it's just part of who I am. I'm a very welcoming person. I'm a person who just enjoys family and getting people together. And so incorporating that into what we do as Meetup organizers I think everyone wants to feel included because obviously you're coming for a reason, you're coming for the niche that you're looking for, and to be able to find that and find people that are like, hey, come on in and join us and be part of what we're doing, and here's what we're actually doing right now, and what would you like to do? What's your focus? And start talking and engaging with that person. That's a big part of what makes Meetup successful, and just enjoying people in general, just being together and working in harmony.
Why does it matter? Like, why does you said last night, and you could have said it, and then I could have put it up on a slide, but you said it's really important for me to bring people together.
Yeah.
Why does it matter?
For me, just coming from a large family and being the only child in my family, and from my mom being the only child, it was important for me to just have brothers and siblings that I never had. And so looking for that with my cousins and my family that I hung out with on the weekends, it was just natural extension of, hey, why don't I get these other people together and let's go do something. So if it wasn't my family, it was just friends hanging out, and then it was like, hey, I can do this in a meetup as well. So it was just a natural transition of what I feel and how I can interact with people, and it just made sense.
How many meetup groups have you been a part of or organized?
Wow.
Focus.
I've probably been part of at least 30 to 40 meetup groups just as a member, but I currently organize and co-organize 4. So it's very active weekends. And I have so many varied interests. So there's always something that pops up on my radar that says, hey, you might be interested in this. I'm like, yes, I am. And I'll just join in and check it out. And it just makes sense. So
Going.
Yeah, exactly.
And what is it about, you guys have a really, well, could you tell your origin story?
Yeah.
So Dermot and I, we organized Culinary Foolinary together, but we met at another meetup called MMA and NYC. It's a fan group for people who like to watch other people punch each other in the face and strangle each other and put them to sleep. So he was already the organizer when I joined. I'd say about after the 3rd meetup that I attended, him, I, and another guy in the group who's from Pittsburgh got together to watch fights on our own. So the guy from Pittsburgh is asking us what part of New York we're from. So I'm like, yeah, I'm from the Bronx. And he's like, yeah. We'll say, yeah, Bronx, all right. What part? So I'm from Castle Hill. Castle Hill? Get out of here. What part of Castle Hill? So I grew up in the projects, down by the water. The projects.
What?
What building in the projects? 2175 building across the street from the Bodega on Lacombe. Okay, what floor? I grew up in 11J. He grew up in 11K, 11L.
Yeah.
So he lived next door to me. And the funny thing is that my best friend has, he used to talk about this dude that used to hang cables out of his bedroom and they'll play video games together. And that was my best friend. And
Multiplayer.
Right. He had an older brother. His best friend was the older brother. So we had this weird connection, and then we figured it out that night. And since then, it's like my brother.
You found each other.
It's like if we were gay, this would be so romantic. But we've always meshed very well. It's funny because we grew up in the same place, saw the same things, and we do definitely have the same temperament on things. Yeah. I would just say that he's a lot more wiser and a lot more mature than I am. I'm very base level with my shit, but this guy's on point.
Well, people talk a lot about your dynamic on your group page, about how important it is that you guys are co-organizers because you play off of one another, so it's working.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Matt, why? Okay, so I'm kind of going through the qualities. We talked a little bit about welcoming, and we're talking a little bit about what it means to be real. I want to know why you're choosing to get groups of dads together in real life. Why doesn't an online platform work for you right now?
Well, I think just in general, why Meetup exists is to bring people together in real life, and that's needed more now than ever, especially given everything going on in the world, but also especially since so much happens online. You can get advice from somebody online, but you can't really bond with somebody in the same way as you can in real life. I've been an at-home dad now for 12 years, and at some point I thought about what a privilege it was for me to be able to be home with my children. It didn't make me a better dad. I'm not a better dad because I get to make them breakfast and lunch and dinner and do their laundry and take them to the doctor.
I see you humble bragging. I see what's happening right now.
But I was like, it's not fair that I have this privilege of spending so much time with my kids, whereas other people do not. Working dads and all sorts of dads should also be able to spend time with their kids. So we started to think about kind of what it means to be a dad, how that role is changing and evolving, and how little opportunity we have to interact with each other in real life. Moms, if any of you are moms, I'm sure many moms in the room, you know the moms groups and how close you get to other moms when you become a mother. That doesn't happen for dads. I was home for 3 years before we started NYC Dads Group, and I did not hang out with any other dads. I hung out with nannies and moms, which I can tell you stories about that, but Lance, my co-organizer and all this, said to me when he decided to take off with his child 3 years, when I was home for 3 years, what have you been doing in New York City this whole time? There's nothing for dads. It's all mommy and me play groups, mommy and me music, art, gym, yoga class. Everything written online is for moms. What have you been doing? I said, I've been hanging out with moms. So it was really he being proactive. He was very proactive in wanting to get a group online. And for me, I didn't know that I had really isolated myself, that I didn't have friends. I was Max's dad. I was not Matt Schneider. I was Max's dad out in the world for 3 years. And looking back, I can now recognize that, but I didn't know that I needed this community of dads like I do.
And it also takes some pressure off of me as a mom, so thank you.
Selfish.
It doesn't just have to be a mom's group, it can be a dad's group too. Okay, how many people are part of your group?
Currently 165, I believe.
Okay, so you've given 165 New Yorkers the opportunity to be part of this DCC group, which is very unique and special in that it's very, very niche. Why does that matter to you to give them that space, to give them that opportunity to be part of that group?
Well, because I also at one point was trying to find people to play with, so it's important for me to be able to have a space where people can come and play this game with us. Also to kind of build a community around this game, because one thing that was kind of fun and interesting for me is, the group's only been around for 13 months. And when I first decided that I wanted to start this meetup group, I started listening to this podcast called Spellburn, which is a podcast about the game Dungeon Crawl Classics. And on Spellburn, they kept talking about Gen Con, which is this big gaming convention in Indianapolis that happens every August. 60,000 people go and they play games. So I decided that I was going to go to Gen Con and check this out. And I went there, and I saw Jen from Spellburn, and I saw Joe Bittman, who wrote this adventure from Dungeon Crawl Class. And I'm super excited and totally geeking out to see these in my mind celebrities, but they're totally not. Yeah. So I ended up meeting these people, and I ended up befriending them. And 1 year later, last month, I went to Gen Con, and the situation was completely different because now I'm on Spellburn, and so I'm on the podcast that I was completely geeking out about. I was there as an official dungeon master. They call it a judge in Dungeon Crawl Classics. I was there as an official judge running games officially for Goodman Games, who publishes the game. So within just the course of 1 year, I'm already an insider in this little world. And the community around Dungeon Crawl Classics is so open and so inviting and so welcoming. And I want to bring that to New York as well. And also, historically, Dungeons & Dragons has been a game for straight white men. And that's kind of where it came from, and I want to be a part of making that not necessarily the case anymore, and making it a safe and comfortable place for women, for people of color, for LGBT people, which is why when you join the Meetup group, you're required to fill out a questionnaire, and the questionnaire only has 2 questions. But the first question is, what is your experience with role-playing games? And the second one is, do you solemnly swear to make this a safe environment for people regardless of gender, age, nationality, ethnicity, gender identification, things like that. And over the course of the 13 months that I've been running this game, most of the people who have come to our games who have a lot of experience playing Dungeons & Dragons or Dungeon Crawl Classics are straight white men, but most of the people who've been coming who have not played any of these games are not. And that's been personally very exciting for me.
You know, one of the things that we were talking about last night is that your meetups offer people the opportunity to meet people outside of their circle. And so I at least tend to stay very narrow in who I spend my very precious time with. And what's cool about the groups that you've created is that people come in and they have a common interest that feels kind of like, okay, lots of people are dads and lots of people like to eat food, and then they meet one another on that common ground and discover that they actually have shared interests even though they're completely different from one another. And that feels like something that's really important in like to actually reweave our social fabric, to be able to find sameness in another person. Big deal. Okay, so we have this quality around being thoughtful and a meetup being made with care and being considered. And we didn't talk about this last night, but Brendan told me that you guys created this really interesting meetup around the time of the travel ban, which I thought was just, I want to know a little bit about that. So could you tell us a bit about it?
Break it down, Durham.
So yes, when Trump decided to ban these fantastic countries in the Middle East, just based on suspicion,
Racism.
Yeah,
And bigotry.
a number of other things.
And stupid-looking red hats.
We, I was looking at this landscape, and these are cuisines that I already enjoy: the Iranian cuisine, Syrian cuisine, Yemeni, et cetera, and the idea hit me to just bring people to these places and kind of show them that this travel ban is bogus, and there are actually families that are impacted and involved that shouldn't be based on this ban or potential ban. And Frank and I just basically decided to do this Trump travel ban series where we would take people to all of the countries, the restaurants that represented the countries that were part of the ban. So this is turned into a 4-part series. It's supposed to be 6, but we couldn't find representation for some of the restaurants. But it turned into this fantastic kind of melange of getting people together to enjoy this food, talk about Trump if you wanted to or not. You know, we didn't.
Wait a second. You tried though.
I
At
did.
these meetups,
time.
every single time, Durham would lean in while it's real quiet. You know, when you eat and food is good and you shut up and just eat, Durham would just lean in and be like, "Any Trump supporters here?" Good. That's what I thought.
And I wanted to hear the other side. I wanted to see what people enjoyed about this guy and what they understand is good about him. And obviously,
It's
he won.
the hair.
And the hair.
It's the hair, sir.
Skin
Something.
tone. Which countries couldn't you find?
What was it?
Was Qatar one of them?
No. I think it.
We did Yemeni
We went
cuisine.
Yemeni. We got Syrian. We had Iranian. No, we had Pakistan. Well, we didn't do Pakistan, but that was easy. I forget which one it is. I forget all of them that were involved, but
We can do some digging and
yeah.
find them. It's really lovely. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, for sure.
Matt, I want you to tell a story about how you helped change the culture of Meetup.
It's a lot of pressure.
Scott, I'm throwing you under the bus, Scott. So Scott Hefferman has been a member of our meetup for quite some time, right around the time he had his daughter, and somehow we found out that he had joined our meetup, and he started coming. And early in our days, we had organized a screening of a movie called The Evolution of Dad, and we had a panel discussion after the movie was all about the changing role of dads and had all these examples. And I had been studying and thinking about fatherhood now for a couple years, and I wanted to have a panel that kind of represented the various issues that we cared about, how dads are represented in the media, how dads are represented in the workplace or treated in the workplace, the experience of a single dad. So we had Scott on the panel as the businessman, the owner of a company, the CEO responsible.
Why are you all laughing? He is a businessman.
It's a good question.
This was
They're recording this.
6, 7, 8 years ago. So Meetup was a lot smaller. Of course he was, but he wasn't running Xerox. He didn't have a huge HR department that was setting policy. But one of the things that I had learned is how important it is for leaders to set the tone for many of the issues that we were talking about, things like paid family leave, or taking paid family leave, or taking a sick day, or having interests outside of work. And one of the questions to Scott was, what are you as a senior leader doing now that you're a dad? How has that changed you, kind of your role and your thinking as a dad? And I believe Scott may come up and correct me, but Scott said that I'm actually taking time every Friday morning to go to a music class with my daughter. Every Friday I sneak out the back and I go to my music class, and I come back at Music Meetup. That's what he corrects me on. So I think I might have been the one to call you. I said, Scott, it's wonderful that you're spending this time on a Friday morning going to do this, but you need to tell everybody that you are taking Friday mornings to go to music class with your new daughter, so that other people kind of recognize that being a parent, having interests outside of work, is important to you as the leader of the company, and is an important part of the culture of Meetup. Is that the story you're telling me?
That's the one.
Checkmate.
And I think what Scott has told me since then, I mean, Scott has always been very thoughtful about the environment that he wants to create here, but I think one of the coolest things that I've heard Scott say about this issue is that other tech companies in New York City are watching what's happening here. So to have been able to play some small part in getting Scott thinking about this, and then having potentially other companies then have similar conversations, feels like we're making some difference.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Scott, did you want to say anything?
It's Scott time.
It's a silly question.
No, I mean it's a really powerful point, and it was the structure of this being a community, of the Dads Meetup being a space where this conversation was happening, that really had this downstream effect. I mean, the impact of the work that we do is you don't really know all that happens as a result. It was the construct of that community, of this culture that certainly got me thinking about, because it raised these questions of, you have Anne Marie Slaughter, this woman, saying that the future of the women's movement is partly the men's movement, meaning that if men step up, then women can be more powerful in they can lean in more and be more powerful in their careers. And it was this whole, all those questions are things you may not be thinking about. And so hats off to Matt and his co-organizer Lance for driving that discussion. And that's what happens when you bring people together. You get people thinking and talking, and then I instead of sneaking off and being a parent, I said, no, we're going to be a culture where people can live their whole lives here in our company, and we're going to model that for progressive companies everywhere.
Amen. Frank,
Yes.
how do you make sure your meetups are a good time?
Oh, I mean, that's easy. Derm and I are silly characters, and I think that Derm does a great job of being inviting and asking people what their background is, understanding their background, and catering conversations to what they would want to talk about. I'm just a guy sitting next to Derm saying weird shit so that people can feel okay about being weird.
Stop it.
Yeah, you're
That's what I do.
underestimating how critical that role is in a dynamic.
Yeah. You need the one guy who's dumb so that everybody could be like, yeah, you know what? If that idiot could come out here and hang out, I could be here too.
You said last night that that one of the things that makes the group really special is the relationship between you guys, and how it would almost continue even if the members didn't exist, which seems counterintuitive, but this idea that makes it kind of low pressure for the members, that you're learning from one another.
It ties into the theme of the group itself. The whole, when you listen to the name, it's culinary foolinary, right? So he's the culinary. He's the guy that knows everything about food. He actually cooks, right? I'm the foolinary. I'm the guy breaking out the microwave stuff, throwing it in the microwave and just bing. Okay, it's now it's time to eat. I'm that guy. So
Trader Joe's orange chicken.
shh, shh, shh. Don't tell them about the secret shit, all right? So, you know, so before any of, like when we first met, we hung out at these meetups, so we would, you know, watch fights, whatever. After the fights, we would go, even though it's 1 o'clock in the morning, he would know everywhere to go to get something good to drink, good to eat, all these dope spots. So what we basically did was, after those meetups, we would go and hang out, and the people from our fight meetups would always be like, yo, so where we going? Before the fights even started, they show up like, yo, where we going today? They're not even talking about the fights. They're talking about where we're gonna eat and get smashed. That's what they're talking about. So after a while, I asked Durham, I was like, you know, man, maybe we should do something where we kind of take this experience or these adventures that we already go on and just document it somehow, or just do something with it. And that's when we came up with the culinary foolinary idea.
And it was even within going on these adventures, there were so many amazing things that happened at the after party, so to say, that we wanted to continue the conversation and talk about it. So we decided, you know what, let's do a podcast behind this. Let's put the word out so that people know what's going on, and then also invite them in. And when we go back to the meetups, like the next time, there were people that would have inside stories about, hey, what happened last Saturday? And they'd be talking about it, and the people who are new would be like, what are you guys talking about? You'll find out tonight. Just join us and come through, and you'll see how we do it.
Have you guys seen a lot of members become organizers because they see you both having such a good time?
Can't say that I have.
Yeah.
No, not really, to be honest.
Have you guys seen that? Yeah.
Oh yeah, a lot of my regular returning players have become event organizers, and they run games now.
Yeah. And
There's,
of course, you have a
4 of
pro. Yeah.
Well, anytime anybody shows any glimpse of hope that they might organize something, we pounce on them. So I haven't seen them organizing other groups, but we certainly kind of put them on our list as an event organizer, so they're empowered to plan stuff around the city.
Cool.
You know, one thing we have seen is we have members in our group that when Frank and I are not able to host, specifically with the MMA events, they're like, we'll do it. We'll jump in for you guys.
step up.
Yeah, they step up, and they want to do it just for that time only, because they realize how hard it is to actually organize a group and put together the venue and the whole nine.
Our MMA setup is kind of intense because we set up bet sheets. We you know,
I thought you said bed sheets.
No,
I was like,
we don't. No,
what's
we don't
happening
lay
at those
down and
meetups?
watch the fights. We drink and watch the
bed
fights.
sheets.
So yeah, so we have these betting sheets or whatever, and I think, and you know, some of these fights are like big deals, right? You know, you say Conor McGregor, and there's like guaranteed 80 people coming out.
Yeah.
You know, with Irish flags wrapped around them or whatever, right? So to be able to talk to all of those people and get to know them, which we specifically focus on making sure we talk to every single person that's there. You know what I mean? When another person shows up and they try to organize, they kind of see like, oh, I see what the work is. This is kind of tough. Yeah. You know, you don't
tiring.
like sometimes there are times where he barely knows what happens in the fights afterwards.
Yeah.
You know, like we'll talk about, oh, did you see this fight? And like, nah, I was talking to this guy about this thing, and it's like. So I think when other people organize our group for us, they kind of learn like this is not. It's not, you know, well, the way that we do it, it's not that easy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of responsibility to hold space for people to connect with one another and to feel comfortable. That's actually not an easy thing to do.
Especially when they're drunk.
Yeah, especially. Okay, we've made it to the rapid fire portion of our programming.
Yes.
I'm just going to ask each of you guys one question individually, and then you'll all get to answer 2 of the same questions. Okay?
Sounds complicated, but I'm ready.
We'll start with Durham because he's the smartest. Durham, what's your favorite restaurant in New York City?
Oh, geez. It used to be the Spice Market, but they closed a couple months ago.
What was it called?
The Spice Market.
Okay.
It's in the Meatpacking District. Amazing Asian, Southeast Asian cuisine. Jean-Georges, I forget how to say his last name.
Tell him, Durham, don't stop.
Chenchin. But Wow, come back to me on that. I'll tell you about another
Okay,
one.
you have
Yeah.
1 more minute to think about
Yeah.
it. Matt, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Other than your child. No.
What kind of question is that? You know what I always say to people, I love opening my inbox in the morning because I don't know what's going to be there. This meetup group that we've created has opened up so many doors that I would never have gone through if I had not have started this group. So it's fun to wake up and kind of see an invitation from the White House or a New York Times interview or
Humble brag.
or that wasn't very humble. That was just full-on bragging.
I was like, that would be fun. Yeah.
My man.
Or I mean, a new book has come out. I mean, there's just so much to do with what we have done that it's fun to figure out what's next.
Yeah. Jeff. What's your
The
go-to?
Obama White House, by the way, not.
Yeah,
I have not been invited to the
I know.
Trump
You would
White House.
decline. Jeff, what's your go-to karaoke song?
My go-to karaoke song, if they have Rock Lobster by the B-52s, that's my choice. If not, it's Bye 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 by NSYNC because they always have.
I want to see you. I want to watch you do that so bad.
I do the dance moves for both songs.
Oh, you're fantastic.
Maybe if we don't have enough questions, we can see what's possible. Okay, if you could invite anyone to join your group, living or dead, who would you invite? But not just invite, but that they would show up and be there and participate.
I would say Joe Rogan.
Who?
Joe Rogan.
Who is that?
He's an MMA commentator, but he's like one of my personal heroes.
Okay.
He's also an amazing podcaster. Yes.
Amazing podcaster, renowned podhead. Guy's right up my alley.
Okay. He's a Renaissance man.
Incredible stand-up comedian.
Okay, I'm gonna ask the product managers to raise their hands. Product managers to raise their hands. Okay, so my next question, just so you know, I just want to make sure that you know that when you share your answers to my question, that they're actual real human beings that are listening.
Have that
If
restaurant,
you
by
could
the way.
add just one product feature. No. If you could add one product feature, what would it be? You only can choose
ready.
one. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so for me,
But you
been
need to
thinking
be
about this
quick
for a
about
while.
it.
I'll
You
be
need
very
to
quick
be
about
like,
it. So we run games for the public, but we also would like to have the opportunity to run private invite-only games as well. And when we have done that, we've had to go to Facebook to do that. So I would love to see if there was an ability within the same meetup group to have both invitation-only private meetups and meetups for the public.
cool. Matt.
I want to be able to communicate with our members my way, not your way. We have an audience, a membership of now 10,000 dads that we can't connect to our blog and our podcast and our social media easily. And I want to be able to do that.
Cool. Durham.
I'd like to be able to mention members in comments because there are times when we leave comments on the within the meetup, members don't know that it's referred to them or they don't get any type of notification, so they don't know to refer back to it. And then when we go to the meetup, they're like, "Oh, you answered that, or you said something about that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So sometimes they're oblivious to actually what happens because they don't get the notification that it pertains to them specifically. So if there was like an @ feature or something like that, that would be great.
Cool.
What Durham said.
Okay, my last question. I'm going to open it up for you guys. How has your group, again, brevity, because you know, how has your group impacted your members' lives?
I think our group, for the culinary foolinary group, I think it's given people a good outlet to come hang out. I think that a lot of people in that group don't have many social outlets, and I think that ours gives them like a place to kind of meet new people. A lot of times people show up and they're like, I just moved here from a different state or from, a different country, and I think food is a good way to bring people together, and they kind of use our group as a jump off point to getting to learn about New York.
I've actually had people come to me and say that I've changed their lives based on just being able to show them around the city and make them feel welcome and familiar with what New York is about, and just meet people. I mean, I've had people that have gotten married just based on being in our group and meeting and still hanging out, and also fulfilling relationships, because there was a couple that came to us and they were kind of at a stale point in their relationship. They wanted something to do together. Excuse me. And they basically found a way to kind of continue their relationship and then make it a little more enriching just by being part of the group. And just discovering things as native New Yorkers they didn't even know were around. So, I mean, there's so many rewarding levels to it for me as well as other members.
Yeah.
So the Meetup group that I run not only has games, but we also have a book club where we're going back and reading all of the classic science fiction and fantasy that inspired the creation of Dungeons & Dragons. And one guy who's been coming to all of those book clubs, he and I decided to start a podcast together. So in addition to the other podcast I'm on, he and I also have a podcast together. So that's changed his life in that sense, because now we have a podcast. But kind of the whole group together, though, I would say that like even just in the 13 months this group has existed, I've met people who I now think are going to be lifelong friends. I've already been, speaking of a marriage, I've been invited to one of their weddings. You know, these are people who in a very short period of time, not only have we created a community around this game, but we've also made really intense, close personal bonds with each other.
Cool. Matt.
Scott said that I should try to cry, or so that one of us should try to cry during this. This is the kind of question.
Scott's not happy
You
until
weren't
someone
supposed
cries.
to say it out loud, sir.
I'm sitting here thinking about my. I mean, we have had so many dads tell us just the experience of being able to meet other dads has, some literally saved their lives. Dads that are depressed, lost, confused, all the way to dads that just enjoy having an outlet. There are dads that come to one of our meetups and said that they haven't been out alone in 5 years since their child was born. Like they just have no friends, they have no outlet they have work, they go home to their family, and that's it. And this has given them some sort of a life. And I really think, I mean, men in general, all the studies out there, men are isolating ourselves, and depression is rampant. So these opportunities for dads and men to come out and meet each other is actually unique. And I think all of us are, and not just creating groups for men, but anytime a meetup starts, you're giving people an opportunity to actually break out of their usual routine, and that's so important. And it really has shown up in the dads that join us to come out.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Okay. Well, round of applause for all these guys.
Thank you.